There are connections that go beyond rational understanding. Have you ever felt that someone simply cannot detach from you, even in silence, at a distance, or after the end of a relationship? There are almost invisible signs, yet deeply perceptible, that reveal when someone is emotionally anchored to you. These signs do not stay hidden for long. They manifest in words, glances, silences, and even in the way the person behaves with others. Carl Jung, in exploring the mysteries of the human psyche, uncovered hidden pathways through which the soul connects and projects onto another. When he cannot stop feeling you, certain signs inevitably appear. In this script, we will dive into Jungian depths to understand how this happens and why. If you are ready to see beyond the surface, comment below, "I recognize the hidden signs of emotional connection." Also, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and leave your support in the comments. This strengthens this space of awareness and allows us to keep sharing content like this. For Carl Jung, our deepest emotional connections are not merely casual. They are living expressions of the unconscious contents that unite us and reveal us to ourselves. When someone cannot stop feeling you, that bond may be rooted in various principles of analytical psychology, especially the concepts of projection, shadow, anima, animus, and the process of individuation. Projection occurs when someone transfers onto another person inner aspects they have not yet recognized in themselves. He may idealize you, feel that you complete him, or that you understand him like no one else, not because you truly are all of that, but because you represent a part of him still not integrated. The persistence of this feeling reflects an unconscious quest for wholeness. The shadow, on the other hand, is the repressed side of personality. You may embody for him exactly what he denies or hides from himself. The fascination, desire, and even unease he feels are manifestations of his confrontation with that shadow. He feels you because, at some level, you awaken an inner mirror. In Jung's universe, there is also the archetype of anima and animus, representing the feminine aspect within the male psyche and the masculine aspect within the female psyche. When a man feels profoundly and persistently connected to a woman, it may be that she is reflecting his anima, the inner image of the feminine that drives him toward emotional growth. Ultimately, all of this belongs to the individuation process, where each significant encounter leads us toward integrating who we truly are. Feeling someone continuously can be, for him, the soul's call toward his own wholeness. Projection is one of the most fascinating and subtle mechanisms of the psyche. Carl Jung understood projection as an unconscious process through which a person transfers internal aspects, often unrecognized or poorly understood, onto another. In the context of an intense emotional bond, this dynamic can create a deep and lasting connection, even without continuous coexistence or a formalized romantic relationship. When he cannot stop feeling you, what is often happening is the activation of a powerful projective process. This projection can occur in the early stages of the bond, when no real intimacy has been built yet, but idealization is already at full force. He may see in you what he longs to find in himself: sensitivity, strength, spontaneity, wisdom, freedom. He unconsciously transforms you into a living mirror of the qualities he does not recognize or cannot express within. The feeling he nurtures for you, then, is not based only on who you are objectively, but on what you represent for his emotional structure. This does not mean the feeling is false. On the contrary, the emotion experienced is real, intense, and transformative. However, the origin of this emotion lies more within him than in the relationship itself. It is as if he were falling in love with a forgotten part of his own soul, using your image as the channel for expression. This type of bond is so strong because it resonates with the inner search for completeness, a journey that, according to Jung, we all walk through life. As this projection strengthens, he may begin to feel that you live inside him. You invade his thoughts, appear in his dreams, echo in songs, phrases, memories, and even in his behavior toward others. This happens because the symbolic image he built of you has taken root in his unconscious, feeding on repressed emotions and unfulfilled desires. And even if external contact is interrupted, the inner connection remains active, sustaining the feeling as if it were still happening in real time. The problem, and also the beauty of projection, lies in its potential for transformation. For him to break free from this emotional cycle, He must recognize that part of what he feels is not exactly about you, but about himself. Yet, if that awareness has not surfaced, he will remain trapped in the emotional bond, convinced that you are the cause of all he feels inside, when in reality, it is his unconscious trying to emerge through this emotional experience. It is common in this kind of bond for him to feel both fascination and unease. The emotional presence you represent can bring comfort, but also discomfort. That is because by projecting onto you a part of his psyche not yet integrated, he comes into contact with inner wounds, insecurities, and desires he does not yet know how to name. You may feel familiar to him, as if he has known you for a long time, even if logically that makes no sense. This deep sense of familiarity is a clear sign of the intensity of projection. The emotional bond built through projection is like a broken mirror. He sees fragments of himself reflected in you, but does not realize he is looking at himself. The image is distorted, yet captivating. When projection goes unrecognized, it can create emotional dependence, obsession, or a sense of emptiness in your absence. He cannot stop feeling you because, in truth, he cannot find himself. It is his unconscious quest for self that keeps him tied to this feeling. On the other hand, when there is awareness of the projective process, this bond can be transformed into self-knowledge. The question shifts from, "Why can't I stop feeling this person?" to, "What is she awakening in me that I need to understand?" And it is at this point that the true path of individuation begins. By understanding that the other is a symbolic mirror of the soul, pain transforms into learning, and the connection ceases to be a burden to become a key for expansion. Within Carl Jung's analytical psychology, the shadow represents all that is repressed, denied, or not accepted by our consciousness. It contains aspects we deem inadequate, unacceptable, or even dangerous. Not only negative traits, but also potentials not yet recognized. When we connect deeply with someone, it is common for that person, unknowingly, to activate parts of our shadow. And it is precisely this activation that can generate overwhelming desire, inexplicable obsession, or the feeling of being unable to free ourselves from that presence. When he cannot stop feeling you, it may be that, unconsciously, you embody the living manifestation of his shadow. This means that you, without conscious effort, touch places he has spent his life avoiding. You may bring a freedom he never allowed himself, an emotional intensity he fears, or a vulnerability he learned to hide. Your existence activates those repressed contents, provoking an inner reaction he cannot rationalize. Desire then intensifies, not because he is simply in love, but because he is in confrontation with himself. The shadow is magnetic. It draws us with force because it represents the inner unknown. And when he encounters someone who represents it externally, the impulse to approach is almost inevitable. It is not merely physical or emotional attraction. It is an unconscious call to something that needs to be integrated. He feels you because, in a way, he needs you as a mirror to see parts of himself. This type of bond is powerful and dangerous at the same time, for the more he resists, the stronger the presence becomes. What begins as fascination can quickly turn into unease. He may swing between approaching and withdrawing, feeling pleasure and fear, seeking contact and avoiding it. This emotional back and forth is typical of the confrontation with the shadow. The presence you represent does not only bring enchantment, it also threatens the personality structure he built to protect himself. And still, he cannot forget you. The shadow has become visible, and ignoring it now requires constant effort that drains his emotional and psychic energy. This process intensifies when he still lacks awareness of his own inner workings. Desire, in this case, takes on shades of obsession. He thinks of you constantly but cannot explain why. He misses you even when there is no logical reason. He dreams, remembers, imagines scenarios, creates narratives. All of this is the unconscious trying to find a way to express what consciousness is not yet ready to embrace. And you, unintentionally, become the living symbol of that repressed need. Curiously, the obsession often has little to do with the person themselves, but with what they symbolize. You may represent for him the impulse for freedom, the desire to break patterns, denied femininity, stifled creativity, forbidden sensuality. Everything hidden in order to fit into the external world now finds a crack to emerge through the feeling you awaken. And since he does not yet know how to deal with these inner forces, the bond with you turns into fixation. True liberation only happens when he recognizes that this bond has more to do with him than with you. By looking within and asking what exactly you awaken, he begins to shed light on his shadow. And this may be a painful process because it requires deconstruction, humility, and courage. But it is also liberating. Desire, once understood, ceases to imprison. It transforms into a guide, a compass pointing toward what must be faced, lived, and integrated. Jung said that no one becomes enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by becoming conscious of their inner darkness. When he cannot stop feeling you, it may be because you are the flame that lit up the forgotten cave of his soul. And until he finds the courage to step into that cave, your presence will keep echoing as a call impossible to ignore. In the archetypal structure of the psyche, according to Carl Jung, the anima represents the unconscious feminine aspect present in the male soul. It is shaped by experiences with the feminine throughout life, from the relationship with the mother to significant female figures to hidden desires and idealizations. The anima is not just an internal image, it is a psychic guide, a channel of connection with the unconscious, with intuition, feeling, and spirituality. When a man encounters a woman who unconsciously aligns with this archetypal image, the effect can be both devastating and enchanting. When he cannot stop feeling you, it may be because you have activated his anima, not only as an idealized figure, but as a mirror of his soul's depths. You are not seen merely as a real person, but as a living symbol of all he seeks, fears, or misses in himself. This archetypal projection is more intense and rooted than ordinary emotional projection, for it deals with collective images of the unconscious. You become, in his perception, the gateway to a dimension of life he longs to access, even without knowing what it truly is. This identification with the anima feels almost magical. He may sense that you understand him without words, that your presence has an almost spiritual effect. The connection transcends logic, time, and distance. He perceives you as someone who awakens something profound, as if you were the answer to questions he did not know he had. The intensity of this experience can be enchanting, but also frightening, for it brings him face to face with parts of himself that were asleep. Feeling, vulnerability, empathy, nurturing, surrender. The anima has the power to guide a man towards self-knowledge, but it can also imprison him in illusions if he is unaware of what he is projecting. He may confuse the inner impulse with real love. The obsession with you in this case is not limited to physical or emotional attraction. It is symbolic. He feels he needs you to feel whole, believing that without this external feminine presence, something essential is missing. This search for wholeness through the other is a clear sign of the anima acting strongly. At this point, the bond intensifies almost inevitably. You begin to inhabit his inner world. Your image blends with dreams, expectations, and unconscious desires. He may start seeing you in others, hearing your voice in his most intimate thoughts, or sensing your presence even without contact. All of this happens because the anima is using your image as symbolic language to manifest itself. He is not just feeling you, he is feeling himself through you. The risk of this process, when unconscious, is extreme idealization. He may place you on a pedestal, ignoring your human flaws, and remain stuck in fantasy, unable to form a real relationship. On the other hand, this experience can open a door to transformation if he understands that what you represent is something he needs to cultivate within himself. Sensitivity, intuition, empathy, and love are not outside him. They are dormant, waiting to be awakened. When Jung speaks of integrating the anima, he refers to this inner movement of recognizing and embracing the feminine within the male soul. If this man is emotionally fixated on you, it may be because he has not yet learned to recognize the anima as part of himself. And until that happens, he will keep seeking outside what he must awaken inside. Your presence, in this case, is not just a memory. It is the unconscious summoning him to find himself, humanize himself, and transform. You have become, symbolically, the call of his soul, and this call cannot be ignored until the journey of integration begins. That is why he cannot forget you, because deep down, he has not yet learned to remember himself. Individuation, in Carl Jung's view, is the process by which the human being moves towards psychic wholeness, integrating the various aspects of personality, conscious and unconscious, into a coherent unity. This process is profound, lengthy, and inevitably marked by meaningful encounters that act as mirrors of what still needs to be seen, healed, or developed within us. When someone cannot stop feeling another, even without physical presence or direct contact, often that bond is being used by the unconscious as a catalyst for this movement of individuation. The connection then becomes a bridge between who he is and who he is meant to become. These striking connections are not random. They arise with intensity because they touch the boundary zones of the psyche, where growth potential lies. You may have awakened in him not only emotions, but also unease, questions, fears, and forgotten desires. This psychic activation is a symbolic language of the unconscious calling him inward. His difficulty in forgetting you is not an emotional weakness, but a sign that something in you pushed him into confrontation with what was dormant. The bond in this sense is not the end, but the beginning of a path. The individuation process requires him to confront his social masks, his projections, his shadows, and also the archetypes dwelling in his psyche. In this context, you may have represented something far greater than just a potential partner. You may have been the symbol of a new cycle, of a break with old patterns, of a call to live more truthfully. And since the ego usually resists change, the image of the one who awakens this inner movement becomes unforgettable, not because of who she is objectively, but for everything she symbolizes. When Jung describes the transcendental function of the psyche, he refers to the unconscious's ability to build bridges between inner opposites, reason and emotion, masculine and feminine, light and shadow, through symbolic experiences. One such experience is precisely deep love, often unrequited or interrupted, that continues to echo in the soul. He does not just miss you, he misses a version of himself he only touched by your side. And until that version is fully integrated, the connection remains alive, insistent, and provocative. Individuation is a painful process because it demands that he abandon the illusion of control and face his own vulnerability. By feeling you so intensely, even without logical explanation, he is forced to recognize that there is something within him not subject to reason's command. This weakens him, but also humanizes him. The image he had of himself begins to break apart, giving way to a new identity, more honest, deeper, more connected to the true self. And this inner rebirth is almost always initiated by a significant encounter. Your presence confronts him with who he is and who he has not yet allowed himself to be. The connection becomes a mirror, not in the superficial sense of identification, but as an archetypal reflection of the journey of transformation. He cannot forget you because you represent a symbolic milestone in his path. Like an unfinished rite of passage, this emotional bond keeps him suspended between two worlds. The old, where everything felt controlled, and the new, where everything is uncertain but full of possibility. That is why he may resist. He may deny, withdraw, or avoid the inner confrontation your memory provokes. But the more he resists, the stronger the sense grows that something important still needs to be understood. Individuation only completes when he accepts this call as part of his evolution, and at that moment, what was once pain can transform into gratitude, not necessarily for you as a person, but for the symbolic role you played in his journey. You were the breaking point, the necessary mirror, the impulse that made his soul awaken. He cannot stop feeling you because ultimately he is feeling himself for the first time in a genuine way. And once this sensation has been awakened, it can never be ignored again. Throughout this journey, we have plunged into the depths of the male psyche through the lens of Carl Jung, uncovering the hidden reasons behind an emotional bond that refuses to fade. When he cannot stop feeling you, it is not just longing or desire. It is an inner movement where projections, shadows, anima, and the call of individuation intertwine. The intensity of the feeling is the reflection of something greater, a transformation trying to take place through this connection. You may have been the mirror, the portal, the symbol, and that does not lessen the authenticity of what was lived. On the contrary, he feels you because in some way his essence was touched, and that touch calls him to recognize himself, to grow, to become whole. If this content resonated with you, subscribe to the channel now and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next videos. Leave your comment sharing what touched you most in this reflection. And now, watch the video appearing on your screen. It is the next step in your journey of self-knowledge. Remember, every deep connection is an invitation to transformation. Embrace the call. You are ready.